Today, we are diving deep into the Trump administration's incredibly contentious immigration strategy. We're going to look at the thinking behind it, the actions that came from it, and of course, the massive resistance it sparked, all based on what the source material tells us. So, to really get the why behind all of this, you have to start with this core idea. It's all about framing the issue around national sovereignty. The argument is that strong borders are, fundamental to what makes a nation a nation. This was really the bedrock justification for the entire strategy. But on the complete other side of the coin, you have a totally different way of looking at it. This perspective, which is also highlighted in the source, says that the methods themselves were a direct challenge to core American values, things like compassion and due process. And that conflict right there between security and values is the tension at the heart of everything we're talking about today. So our goal here isn't to take a side, but really to just break down the mechanics of this strategy. We're going to look at the actions, the policies, and the reactions to try and build a clearer picture of how this whole thing unfolded. Okay, here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the overall strategy, which has been called the Blitz. Then, we'll zoom in on the raids that brought that strategy to life. After that, we'll peek behind the curtain at the policy reforms that made it all possible. And finally, we'll look at the resistance that pushed back hard. All right, let's start with the big picture, the overarching strategy itself, what the source describes as an immigration blitz. So what does blitz actually mean here? Well, it wasn't just one single policy. Think of it as an intense and super fast series of actions happening on many fronts all at once. The goal was really twofold: enforce the laws already on the books with as much pressure as possible, and at the same time, try to deter future immigration with a major show of force. Okay, so now let's see how that big strategy actually translated into action on the ground. The raids, they really became the most visible and, you could say, the most controversial part of the whole blitz. The source material talks about these large-scale enforcement operations, and they weren't random. They were strategically aimed at workplaces and communities, places with large undocumented populations, all with the very direct goal of detention and ultimately deportation. And to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, the source points to a staggering 70% jump in workplace arrests in just the first year. That one number, it says so much about the intensity of this blitz in action. This quote from a worker who was actually caught up in one of these operations really captures the human impact the source describes. One day you are at work, and the next, your life is turned upside down. It was chaos. It just highlights how sudden and life-altering these raids really were for people. So those were the actions you could see. But what was going on behind the scenes to make them happen? Well, that brings us to the policy engine that was really powering this whole strategy. Now, a huge piece of this was the Safe Third Country Agreement. This is a really crucial concept to get. Basically, it meant that if someone seeking asylum traveled through a country that was considered safe, like Mexico, on their way to the US, they were expected to have applied for asylum there first. And if they didn't, well, their US asylum claim could be thrown out before it even got started. So here's how that would work in the real world. An asylum seeker gets to the US border. Right away, officials would look at their travel route. If they passed through a safe country, they were often just ruled ineligible for US asylum. Then, under some related policies, many were sent back to Mexico to wait for their court dates, a policy that people started calling Remain in Mexico. And the change this created was, well, it was dramatic. Before, an asylum seeker could pretty much make their case in the US, no matter how they got there. After this reform, the route they took became this massive barrier, and it effectively disqualified tons of applicants before their personal stories were even heard. Of course, a strategy this big is going to cause an equally big response. And that brings us to the last piece of this puzzle, the societal pushback and all the organized resistance that cropped up. Yeah, the blitz did not happen in a vacuum. It set off this huge, diverse reaction from almost every corner of society, which created a really powerful counter-narrative to what the administration was doing. And this resistance wasn't just one thing. It took all kinds of forms. You had immediate lawsuits from civil rights groups. You had cities declaring themselves sanctuaries to try and limit cooperation. There were massive public protests. And you heard really vocal opposition from politicians and even some corporations. You can actually see the cause and effect pretty clearly over time. An executive order gets signed in early 2017, and boom, almost right away you get airport protests and legal challenges. The zero tolerance policy in mid-2018, that sparks a national outcry. Every big policy move was met with a clear, direct reaction. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, so let's pull all of these different threads together and just quickly summarize the key takeaways here. It really boils down to these 4 pieces. You've got the Blitz, that's the deliberate, high-intensity game plan. That plan was carried out through the raids, the very public enforcement actions. Powering all of it were the reforms, those behind-the-scenes policy changes, and responding to all of it was the resistance, that widespread pushback from all over. You can see how each part just fuels the next one. And that really leaves us with a critical question, one that goes way beyond this specific issue. How does this intense dynamic, this constant push and pull between sweeping executive action and massive public resistance, ultimately shape the future of a country's national policies?